The evening wind carried dust through the streets of Dry Willow, coating everything in a fine layer of grit that seemed to settle into the very soul of the place. Eva Hale pulled her shawl tighter as she made her way behind the church, the empty water bucket swinging in her grip. The sun had dropped behind the mesas an hour ago, leaving only a bruised purple sky and the first stars. She moved quietly, as was her way. 20 years old and already marked by the kind of silence that came from too much loss too early. Her parents lay in the churchyard, victims of cholera on the wagon trail 2 summers past. The debt for their burial still hung over her like a storm cloud, binding her to this position as housekeeper for Reverend Abram Pike. The well stood at the edge of the church property, its windmill creaking in the darkness. Eva had made this trip countless times, always at this hour when the town's eyes were turned elsewhere toward their suppers, their evening drinks, their private sins. She was halfway to the well when she heard them. Boots scuffing dirt, the clink of spurs, low laughter that held no warmth. 3 shapes emerged from behind the tool shed, even in the poor light. She recognized them young men from town, the kind who spent their days drinking and their nights looking for trouble. Well now. The tallest one said, Tom Garrett. She knew him. Son of the livery owner. If it ain't the preacher's little saint. Eva's fingers tightened on the bucket handle. She kept walking, eyes fixed on the well. Hey now, we're talking to you. Another voice. Jake Miller. He stepped into her path. Ain't polite to ignore folks. Please, Eva said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to fetch water. Please, Tom mimicked, his friends laughing. Always so proper, so pure. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. Bet you ain't so pure as you pretend. Eva stepped back, her heart hammering. Not from what they might do, though, that fear was there, but from what people would say if anyone saw a young woman, alone with men after dark. In a town like Dry Willow, reputation was more fragile than frost. Let me pass, she said, louder this time. Or what? Jake reached for her arm. You'll tell the Reverend he can't even keep his church roof from leaking. A voice cut through the darkness. That's enough! The words were quiet, but they carried weight. A man stood at the corner of the church, barely visible in the shadows. He stepped forward, and the dim light from the parsonage window caught the dust on his long coat, the worn leather of his holster. Don't recall asking for company, Tom said, but his voice had lost its edge. The stranger moved with an easy confidence, like a man comfortable with darkness. Didn't offer any, just stating a fact. The lady needs water. You boys need to move along. Eva saw it then, the subtle shift in the young men's postures, the way they suddenly seemed aware of the stranger's gun, though he hadn't touched it. These were boys who played at being dangerous. This man didn't need to play. We weren't doing nothing. Jake muttered, Good. Keep it that way. They left with muttered curses and backward glances. Eva stood frozen, the bucket trembling in her grip. The stranger watched them go, then turned to her. You hurt. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Go on, then. Get your water. She made it 3 steps before her knees nearly gave. The stranger caught her elbow, steadying her with a touch so light she barely felt it through her sleeve. Easy now, he said. They're gone. Up close, she could see him better. Dark hair that needed cutting. Stubble that said he'd been riding hard. Eyes that seemed to take in everything and give away nothing. Jesse Raines, though she wouldn't learn his name until later. Thank you, she managed. He released her arm, stepped back. Man should know better than to corner a woman in the dark. There was something in the way he said it, a weight that suggested personal history. Eva found herself looking at him, really looking for the first time. His clothes were trail-worn but clean. His boots quality despite the dust. A drifter, maybe, but not a saddle tramp. I should, she gestured toward the well. I'll wait. Make sure they don't circle back. She wanted to tell him it wasn't necessary, that she'd been handling such encounters for months now. But something in his steady presence made her simply nod. She filled the bucket, the windmill groaning overhead like a living thing in pain. When she turned back, he was scanning the darkness, alert but calm. "You work for the Reverend?" he asked as they walked back toward the church. "Yes." "Good man." "He's proper righteous." The stranger made a sound that might have been amusement. "That's one kind of good, I suppose." They reached the back door of the parsonage. Light spilled out from the kitchen window, and Eva could see Reverend Pike at his desk in the study, bent over his sermon notes. Safe, familiar, confining. "Thank you again," she said. He touched the brim of his hat. "Lock your doors tonight. Those boys were liquored up enough to maybe try something foolish." Then he was gone, melting back into the darkness like smoke. Eva stood on the step, bucket heavy in her hands, watching the space where he'd been. The church bell rang once, softly, moved by the wind, a lonely sound that seemed to echo in her chest. Inside, Reverend Pike looked up from his work. "You were gone longer than usual." "The windmill was stubborn," she said, not quite a lie. He grunted, already turning back to his papers. "See that you bar the doors. I heard voices out there. This town," he shook his head. "Satan finds work for idle hands." Eva set the bucket by the stove, her mind still on the stranger. On the way, he'd appeared just when needed, like something out of the dime novels she'd read back when her parents were alive and she'd had time for such things. She prepared the Reverend's evening tea, moving through the familiar motions. But her hands shook slightly as she poured, and twice she caught herself glancing toward the window, toward the darkness beyond. Later, after Pike had retired and she'd finished her chores, Eva made her way to her small room off the kitchen. She barred the door as instructed, then sat on her narrow bed, still fully dressed. The encounter played through her mind the fear, the relief, the strange flutter in her chest when the stranger had steadied her. She knew she should pray, should thank the Lord for sending protection, but her thoughts kept drifting to the man himself, the quiet authority in his voice, the careful way he'd touched her arm, the suggestion of some deeper understanding in his eyes. A sound made her freeze footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate. Her heart hammered as they paused at the door. Then, after a long moment, they moved away. She crept to the window, peered through the curtain. Nothing but darkness and the skeletal outline of the windmill against the stars. It wasn't until morning, when she went to fetch fresh water, that she noticed. The broken latch on the back door, the one Pike had been meaning to fix for months, had been repaired. The screws were new, brass bright against the weathered wood. Someone had worked on it during the night, quietly, carefully. Eva ran her fingers over the repair, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. In a town full of men who took what they wanted, someone had given without asking for anything in return. She looked out across the dusty streets of Dry Willow, wondering where he was, wondering if she'd see him again. The wind picked up, setting the church bell to ringing softly. Like a promise, she thought, or maybe a warning. In the territory, it was often hard to tell the difference. The morning sun cast long shadows across the church floor as Eva swept, dust motes dancing in the light like tiny prayers. Reverend Pike stood at the pulpit, practicing his sermon for the evening service, his voice echoing in the empty sanctuary. "The path of righteousness is narrow," he intoned, "and fraught with temptation. We must guard not only against sin, but against the very appearance of impropriety." Eva's broom stilled. She'd heard variations of this theme before, but today the words seemed aimed at her like arrows. Pike descended from the pulpit, his boots clicking on the worn floorboards. "Eva, I must speak plainly. Word has reached me of last night's incident." Her stomach tightened. Of course, in Dry Willow. Secrets had the lifespan of morning dew. "Those boys were drunk. Reverend, a stranger helped." "Precisely." Pike's thin face grew stern. A stranger. A drifter. Do you understand what people will say? A young woman, unmarried, keeping company with such men after dark. I wasn't keeping company, I was fetching water. The truth matters little when weighed against perception. He moved closer, and Ava could smell the pomade in his gray hair, see the worry lines etched deep around his eyes. This congregation walks a knife's edge. Child, the saloon owners mock us, the miners ignore us. Our reputation for moral uprightness is all that keeps the doors open and the collection plate from staying empty. Ava lowered her gaze, the collection plate that never held quite enough to pay off her parents' burial debt. I'll be more careful, she murmured. See that you are, and if this stranger appears again, you are not to speak with him, not to acknowledge him. We cannot afford even a whisper of scandal. The front door creaked open, saving her from response. Both turned to see the stranger from last night silhouetted in the doorway, hat in hand. Pardon the interruption, Jessie said. I'm looking for work. Pike's jaw tightened. The mines are hiring, or the railroad camp north of town. Not that kind of work. Jessie stepped inside, his spurs ringing softly. Noticed your windmill's about to give up the ghost. The bearing's shot, and the tail vanes hanging by rust and habit. I can fix it. We have no money for repairs, Pike said stiffly. Not asking for money, just meals while I work. Maybe a place to bed down in the barn. Ava watched Pike wrestle with the offer. The windmill had been struggling for months, and without it, hauling water would become a daily hardship. But accepting help from this man— Why? Pike asked finally. Why would you work for just food and shelter? Jessie's eyes flickered to Ava for just a moment before returning to the Reverend. Man's gotta eat, and I prefer honest work to other options. The weight in those last words hung in the air. Pike studied him with the intensity of a man reading scripture. You're running from something. We're all running from something. Reverend, question is whether we're running towards something better. A long silence stretched between them. Outside, Ava could hear the wounded windmill groaning in the morning breeze. 3 days, Pike said finally. You fix the windmill in 3 days, and I'll feed you. You sleep in the barn. You don't speak to anyone from the congregation, and you stay away from Miss Hale. Jessie nodded slowly. Fair terms. Ava, show him to the barn, then return immediately. She led Jessie out the back way, acutely aware of Pike watching from the window. The barn was small, just 3 stalls for the Reverend's old mare and the buggy. Dust filtered through gaps in the boards. Haze in the loft, she said quietly. There's a pump out back for washing. I've slept in worse. He set down his saddlebags, and she noticed how carefully he handled them, like they contained something precious or dangerous. Those boys from last night, he said, not looking at her. They bother you regular. It's nothing I can't handle. That wasn't what I asked. She hesitated. Tom Garrett's been persistent since his father started lending money to the church. Jessie's hands stilled on his bags. Lending money? For repairs. Expenses. She shouldn't be telling him this, but something about his steady presence invited truth. The Reverend says we must be grateful for Christian charity, even when it comes with strings. It wasn't a question. Ava felt heat rise to her cheeks. I should go. Miss Hale. His voice stopped her at the door. That latch I fixed last night, check it regular. Wood soft around the screws. Won't hold against someone determined. She nodded and fled, feeling his gaze follow her across the yard. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of chores. From the kitchen window, she watched Jessie examine the windmill, running his hands over the mechanism like a doctor checking for breaks. He worked methodically, making notes in a small book he pulled from his pocket. Near noon, the peace shattered. Horses thundered down Main Street, and Ava recognized the lead rider, Deputy Marshal Calvin Boone, his star glinting in the sun. Behind him rode 3 men she didn't know, hard-faced and trail-dusty. They dismounted at the church, Boone's boots hitting the ground heavy with authority. Pike emerged, wiping his hands on a handkerchief. "Reverend." Boone touched his hat brim. "Looking for information about a man. Railroad payroll went missing 2 days back. Guard said the thief was a lone rider, dark hair, riding a bay mare with a white blaze." Eva's hands clenched in her apron. Jesse's horse, tied behind the barn, matched that description exactly. "We've seen no strangers," Pike said carefully. Not quite a lie, Jesse wasn't a stranger anymore. "Mind if we look around?" Boone's tone suggested it wasn't really a question. "Of course not. We have nothing to hide." The men spread out, checking the church, the parsonage grounds. Ava forced herself to continue working, though her hands shook as she peeled potatoes for the noon meal. Through the window, she saw one of Boone's men approaching the barn. Jesse was already stepping out, hands visible and empty. The deputy's hand dropped to his gun. "Easy there," Jesse said calmly. "Just working on the windmill." Boone strode over. "That your bay tied out back?" "It is." "Where were you 2 nights ago?" "Camped by Willow Creek, alone, so no one to vouch for it." Boone studied him like a snake watching a mouse. "Convenient." "Truth often is inconvenient." Jesse replied, "That's how you know it from lies." One of Boone's men emerged from the barn carrying Jesse's saddlebags. "Want me to search these, deputy?" Eva held her breath. Jesse's face remained calm, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear, anger. "No need," Boone said finally. "We're looking for someone carrying heavy gold. Those bags couldn't hold enough to matter." He stepped closer to Jesse. "But I'll be watching you, stranger. This town's under my protection." "Protect it from those who need protecting from," Jesse said quietly. "Not from those doing honest work." For a moment, the 2 men locked eyes. Then Boone turned sharp on his heel. "Mount up. We'll check the camps north of town." They rode out in a cloud of dust, leaving silence in their wake. Pike emerged from the church, his face pale. "You brought trouble to my door," he said to Jesse. "Trouble was already here. Reverend, I just gave it something new to look at." "Nevertheless, I think it best—" A grinding screech cut him off. The windmill, as if finally giving up, shuddered to a complete stop. In the sudden quiet, they could hear water dripping somewhere deep in the well. Jesse looked up at the frozen blades. 3 days, you said. Clock's ticking." Pike's mouth worked soundlessly. Then he turned and stalked back to the church. Ava started to follow, but Jesse's voice stopped her. "Miss Hale, that Deputy Boone, he takes special interest in the church." She glanced back, knowing she shouldn't answer. "He's close with Mr. Caro, the mine owner." "The one whose son bothers you." It wasn't a question. Ava felt exposed, like he could read her history in the dust on her shoes. "I have work to do," she said. "We all do," he replied, already turning back to the windmill. "Question is whether we're doing the right work." Ava hurried inside, but his words followed her. Through the kitchen window, she watched him climb the windmill tower, moving with the confidence of a man who'd fixed many broken things, maybe even some that couldn't be fixed with tools. The cornbread was burning. She yanked it from the oven, salvaging what she could. Her hands still shook, but not from fear now. Something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. Outside, metal rang against metal as Jesse worked. The sound echoed across the dusty yard like a bell, calling something to wake in her chest. 3 days, Pike had said. 3 days to fix what was broken. Ava wondered if some things could be mended that quickly, and whether other things, once broken, could ever be made whole again. The second morning dawned gray and still, clouds pressing low against the mesas like a held breath. Ava carried water to the barn, her feet finding the familiar path without thought. Inside. Jessie was already working. Tools spread on a blanket like surgical instruments. "You're up early," she said, setting the bucket down. "Habit." He didn't look up from the bearing he was cleaning. "Army drums stay with you." "You served." 4 years. Learned to fix what was broken, patch what was torn. His hands moved with practiced efficiency. Useful skills for after. Ava knew she should leave, but found herself lingering. "Is that where you learned about windmills?" "Kansas, stationed at Fort Larned. Nothing but wind and grass for miles." He glanced up then, and she was struck again by how his eyes seemed to hold depths. "You always ask this many questions." Heat touched her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Didn't say I minded." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Just surprised. Most folks in towns like this, they've forgotten how to be curious." She watched him work for another moment, then voiced the question that had kept her awake. "What's in the saddlebags? The ones Deputy Boone wanted to search?" His hands stilled. "You sure you want to know?" Yes." Jessie rose, crossed to where his bags hung on a peg. He withdrew something wrapped in oilcloth, handled it like spun glass. "Evidence," he said simply. He unwrapped it partially, revealing papers covered in neat writing, a heavy seal pressed in wax at the bottom. Even from where she stood, Eva could see it was official, important. Evidence of what? That sometimes the law and justice ain't the same thing. He rewrapped the papers carefully. That men with badges can be bought same as anyone else. Ava's throat felt dry. "Deputy Boone?" "Among others." Jessie returned the packet to his bags. "Year ago, my sister Sarah took work at the Caro mine, bookkeeping. She was always clever with numbers." His voice roughened. "Cave-in killed her and 12 others. Caro had been warned the timber supports were failing. Ignored it to save money." "I'm sorry," Ava whispered. "Sarah wrote everything down, every warning ignored, every safety measure skipped, even had copies of the bribe payments to keep inspectors away." He touched the saddlebags. "It's all here, waiting for someone with authority to care. The federal marshal in Santa Fe is Boone's cousin." Jessie's smile was bitter. The territorial governor might listen, but getting to him means staying alive long enough to make the journey. Ava felt the weight of this knowledge settle on her shoulders. "That's why you're really here, not just passing through." "Sometimes the best place to hide is where they've already looked." He returned to his work. "Besides, windmill needs fixing." She picked up the empty bucket. "Needing something to hold. Tom Garrett's father is close with Caro. All the town's money men are." "I figured as much." Jessie fitted a new piece into the bearing assembly. "Men like that, they stick together, makes them feel powerful." "They are powerful. Power built on fear ain't power. It's just borrowed time." The barn door creaked, and both tensed. But it was only Pike, his face stern with disapproval. "Ava, you've been gone 20 minutes for a simple water delivery." "My fault, Reverend," Jessie said smoothly. "Asked her about the well depth. Need to know for the pump adjustment." Pike's eyes narrowed, clearly not believing it. "Return to your duties, Ava, now." She fled, but not before catching Jessie's slight nod. "It's all right, Asterisk," the gesture said. "Asterisk, I understand." In the kitchen, she tried to focus on bread making, but her hands moved mechanically while her mind churned. A year ago, the cave-in had been a year ago, and just over a year ago, Tom Garrett had cornered her in the storeroom after Bible study, pressing too close, his hands too bold. When she'd pushed him away and threatened to tell, he'd laughed. "Tell who my father owns your reverend's mortgage. You're nothing but a charity case." She'd kept silent, adding it to the collection of things she didn't speak about. But the next Sunday, Tom was banned from Bible study for disruptive behavior. Pike never said why. Tom's father had raged, threatened to call in the church's debts. But Pike held firm on that one point, even as he bent on others. Now Eva wondered if Jessie was right. If fear was just borrowed time. When did the loan come due? Through the window, she watched him work on the windmill, steady and methodical. He'd removed his jacket despite the cool air, and she could see the lean strength in his movements, the careful precision, a man who'd learned to fix broken things. "I don't want to be in debt to anyone," she said aloud to the empty kitchen, practicing the words. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Mrs. Garrett arrived with her prayer circle. 6 women in their best weekday dresses, faces pinched with righteous concern. "We've come about the situation," Mrs. Garrett announced, settling her bulk into Pike's best chair like a hen on a nest. "Situation?" Pike asked carefully. "The drifter, working here, alone, with an impressionable young woman present." Her eyes found Eva, who was serving tea. The appearance of impropriety can be as damaging as impropriety itself. "I assure you, everything is entirely proper." "Is it, Mrs.?" Garrett's voice cut like shears. "My Tom says he saw them talking, alone, in the barn." Ava's hand trembled slightly as she poured. One drop of tea spotted the white tablecloth like blood. "I'm sure whatever Tom saw," Pike began. "Tom is observant, protective. He cares about this community's moral standing." Mrs. Garrett's smile was sharp, as does his father, as do all of us who support this church. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Eva saw Pike's shoulders slump slightly. "Of course, I understand your concerns." A knock at the door interrupted. Jessie stood on the threshold, hat in hand. "Pardon the intrusion. Reverend, need you to see something at the windmill." Pike clearly wanted to refuse, but Jessie's expression suggested urgency. "Ladies, if you'll excuse me for just a moment." He followed Jessie out, through the window. Eva watched them at the windmill, Jessie pointing to something in the mechanism. Pike's face changed from irritation to concern. "Well, Mrs. Garrett said, her voice filling the space. "Eva, dear, sit with us." It wasn't a request. Eva sat on the edge of a chair, hands folded. "You're young." "Mrs. Garrett continued, "Perhaps you don't understand how the world works, but your reputation is all you have. Once lost, it can never be recovered." "Yes, ma'am." "This man, this drifter, has he been familiar with you?" Eva met her gaze steadily. "He fixed a broken latch. He's repairing the windmill. That's all." "Is it Mrs.?" Miller leaned forward. "Because it seems to me a young woman with debts to pay might be tempted to find other solutions." The words hit like a slap. Eva felt heat rise in her face. But before she could respond, Pike returned. "Ladies, I'm afraid we have a situation. The windmill damage is worse than thought. The entire mechanism needs rebuilding, or we'll have no water for Sunday's service." "Then send him away and hire proper workmen," Mrs. Garrett said. "With what funds?" Pike's voice held an edge Eva had never heard. "The collection barely covers our monthly obligations. Mr. Raines is working for meals only. Unless," he paused meaningfully, "unless the church's supporters might contribute to the repair fund." Silence. The women exchanged glances, suddenly finding the teacups fascinating. "I thought not," Pike said quietly. "Then we must accept help where it's offered. Mustn't we, even if it comes from imperfect sources?" "Mrs. Garrett rose, gathering her dignity like skirts. "We're only thinking of the church's reputation. Reverend." "As am I, Mrs. Garrett, as am I." After they left, trailing disapproval like perfume, Pike slumped in his chair. Eva began clearing the tea things. "Leave them," he said tiredly. "Eva, what hold does Tom Garrett think he has on you?" She froze. "Sir, I'm not blind. Child, just sometimes cowardly." He rubbed his face. What happened? Ava set down the cups carefully, choosing words like stepping stones across a flood. Last year, after Bible study, he pressed his attention. I refused. He said I had no choice, given my position. But you never told me. You had troubles enough. The church debts, the roof repairs. She managed a small smile. I handled it. By staying silent, by carrying it alone. Pike stood, moved to the window where Jessie could be seen working. Perhaps I've been wrong about many things. About what strength looks like, about who needs protecting from whom. That evening, as Ava prepared supper, Jessie appeared at the kitchen door with the water buckets. "Thought I'd save you a trip," he said. She knew she should send him away, but instead heard herself saying, "Come in, supper's almost ready." He entered carefully, like a man walking on ice. Reverend might not approve. The Reverend is praying in the sanctuary. He does that when the world doesn't match his expectations. She ladled stew into bowls. "Sit." They ate in silence at first, the only sound the wind rattling the windows. Finally, Jessie spoke. "You reminded me of Sarah today." Ava looked up, surprised. "The way you handled those women, steady, dignified, not letting them see they'd drawn blood." He smiled sadly. "Sarah never let them see either. Right up until the mountain fell on her." "I'm sorry," Ava said. "About your sister, about all of it." Being sorry doesn't change anything. Only action does that. He studied her across the table. "What holds you here, Eva, besides the debt?" The question she'd been asking herself. "Where would I go? I have no family, no trade besides keeping house." That's fear talking. Maybe, but it's also truth. Jessie pulled something from his pocket, a length of leather cord. "Can I show you something?" She nodded. He moved his chair closer, began demonstrating a complex knot. "Bowline," he said. "Sailors use it, stronger under pressure, but easy to untie when you need to." His fingers moved surely, creating the knot. "See, the rabbit comes out of the hole, around the tree, back down the hole." Ava tried to follow his movements, her fingers tangled in the cord. "Here." He covered her hands with his, guiding them through the motion. His hands were warm, calloused, gentle. "Don't think so hard, just let your hands learn." The third time, she managed it. The knot held firm when pulled, but loosened easily when worked from the right angle. "Why show me this?" she asked. "Because sometimes we need to know how to hold tight, and sometimes we need to know how to let go." He was close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Both are kinds of strength. The kitchen door opened. Pike stood there, taking in the scene, their chairs close. Jessie's hand near hers on the table. "I see," was all he said. Jessie stood. "I should check the windmill bearings one more time before dark." After he left, Pike sat heavily in the vacated chair. "I've prayed on this." Ava sought guidance. She waited, the leather cord still in her hands. "Stay away from him, not because of what others might say, but because men like him carry storms with them, and you've weathered enough storms for one lifetime." Eva tied the bowline again, watching it hold firm under pressure. "What if the storm is already here, Reverend? What if we've just been pretending the sky is clear?" Pike had no answer for that. Outside, the broken windmill tried to turn in the evening breeze, metal crying against metal. The sound followed Eva to a room that night, where she practiced the bowline knot until her fingers knew it by heart, a knot that held firm but knew how to let go. Through her small window, she could see Jessie's shadow moving in the barn, the faint glow of a lantern. Whatever evidence he carried, whatever justice he sought, it had brought him here, to their broken windmill, their struggling church, their small, suffocated town. Asterisk. Sometimes we need to know how to hold tight. Ava pressed her palm against the cool window glass. watching his shadow work late into the night. Somewhere out there, Deputy Boone was watching. The Garretts were scheming. The weight of debt and duty pressed down like mountain stone. Asterisk. And sometimes we need to know how to let go. Not yet, she decided, but soon, when the windmill was fixed, when the water ran clear, when the time for letting go finally came due. The third morning broke with thunder but no rain, the sky pressing down like a bruised fist. Ava woke to the sound of horses, many of them, their hooves striking the packed earth of Main Street like war drums. From her window, she saw Deputy Boone leading a group of 8 men, all armed, all wearing the hard expressions of those who'd ridden through the night. They dismounted at the church, and Boone hammered on the door with his pistol butt. "Open up. Reverend federal business." Ava dressed quickly, her fingers fumbling with buttons. By the time she reached the kitchen, Pike was already at the front door, his nightshirt hastily tucked into trousers. "Deputy Boone." Pike's voice was carefully neutral. "Rather early for a social call." "Not social. Got word the railroad thief might be hiding in church property. We're searching every building." "I've told you, we have no—" "With respect, Reverend, your word ain't enough anymore." Boone pushed past him. "Judge Carter signed a warrant. Every building, every room." The men flooded in like muddy water, their boots tracking dirt across floors Ava had cleaned yesterday. She stood frozen as they overturned furniture, rifled through cupboards, even pawed through Pike's precious books. "What precisely are you looking for?" Pike demanded. "Gold, securities, evidence of guilt." Boone's eyes found Ava, or accomplices. Jesse appeared in the back doorway, fully dressed despite the early hour. He surveyed the chaos with that same steady calm. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "looking for something specific." Boone's hand dropped to his gun. "You figured you'd rabbit during the night." "Hard to finish fixing a windmill from the next county." Jesse stepped inside, hands visible and empty. "You want to search my possessions? Go ahead, they're in the barn." "Already tossed the barn." One of Boone's men said, "Nothing but tools and old hay." Eva's heart lurched. The saddlebags. Where had he hidden them? "Check again," Boone ordered. "And tear this place apart if you have to. The money's here somewhere." For the next hour, they searched with increasing desperation. Floorboards were pried up, mattresses slashed. Even the stove was checked for hidden compartments. Ava watched her small, orderly world torn apart, her few possessions scattered like leaves. When they reached her room, she started forward. "Please, that's what—" Boone blocked her path. "You got something to hide, girl." "Leave her be," Jesse said quietly. Boone rounded on him. "You giving orders now?" "Just stating preferences." The 2 men faced each other, the air between them charged like the storm outside. Then Boone smiled, an ugly twist of lips. "Search her room double careful. Boys, check every petticoat and stocking." Heat flooded Ava's face. Pike stepped forward. "Deputy, that's entirely inappropriate." "So is harboring fugitives." "Reverend?" Boone's eyes never left Jesse. "Unless you want me to arrest you for obstruction." They tore through her meager belongings with crude comments and rough hands. Her mother's Bible, her father's letters, the few precious things she'd saved all scattered and pawed through. One man held up her nightgown, grinning. "Real pretty. Deputy, shame to waste it on church living." Jesse moved so fast Eva barely saw it. The man's wrist was in Jesse's grip, bent at an angle that made him drop the garment with a yelp. "That's enough," Jesse said, still in that deadly quiet voice. "You assaulting my deputy." Boone had his gun half drawn. "Just helping him remember his manners." Jesse released the man, who stumbled back, cradling his wrist. "Man who can't respect a woman's things ain't much of a man at all." The room went still. Ava could hear her own heartbeat, could see Pike's lips moving in what might have been prayer. Then Boone laughed, harsh as a crow. "Boys, arrest him. Assault on a peace officer." They moved forward, but Jesse held up a hand. "One question first. Deputy, you ever wonder why Caro's so eager to find this supposed railroad money? Because it's the law. Because he organized the theft himself." Jesse's words cut through the room. "Hired men to hit his own payroll shipment, collect the insurance, and blame it on a convenient stranger. Only the men got greedy. Kept the gold instead of turning it over. That's a hell of an accusation. Truth usually is." Jesse looked around the room, meeting each man's eyes. "Ask yourselves why a mine owner with more money than God cares so much about a railroad theft. Unless maybe that theft threatens to expose something bigger." Doubt flickered across some faces. Boone's grew darker. "Enough talk. Take him." They grabbed Jesse's arms, and he didn't resist. But as they marched him past Ava, he caught her eye and glanced meaningfully at the kitchen stove. Understanding flashed through her. The stove they'd already searched, the one place they wouldn't look again. "Wait," Pike said suddenly. "If you're arresting this man, I demand to know the specific charges." "I told you, assault. On a man who was manhandling a young woman's private garments." Pike's voice gained strength. "In front of witnesses, I think Judge Carter might find that interesting, especially given Miss Hale's spotless reputation." Boone turned slowly. "You threatening me, Reverend?" "I'm stating facts, just as Mr. Raines stated facts about suspicious timing and motivation." Pike moved to stand beside Eva. "This congregation has tolerated much in the name of peace, but there are limits." "Your congregation," Boone sneered. "You mean Garrett and Caro and the others who hold your debts? Think they'll stand by you when push comes to shove?" "I think," a new voice said from the doorway. "That depends on what's being pushed." Samuel Garrett stood there, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. His son Tom lurked behind him, eyes finding Eva with familiar hunger. Mr. Garrett," Boone straightened. "We were just making enough noise to wake the dead, and the neighbors, and the newspaper editor who lives 3 doors down." Garrett entered, surveying the destruction. "Rather excessive for a simple search, wouldn't you say?" "The railroad theft is a federal matter, is it not? Yet I see no federal marshals, just local boys playing at authority." Garrett's smile was thin. "Bad for business. All this commotion makes the town look lawless, unstable, the kind of place investors avoid." Ava watched the power shift in the room like wind changing direction. Boone's certainty wavered. "Mr. Caro specifically requested." "Mr. Caro doesn't speak for all of us." Garrett examined a torn hymnal with distaste. "Release the man. If you have evidence, present it to Judge Carter properly. If not," he shrugged eloquently. Boone's jaw worked. Finally. He nodded to his men. They released Jesse, who straightened his shirt calmly. "This isn't over," Boone said. "No," Jesse agreed. "It's just beginning." The deputies filed out, leaving destruction in their wake. Garrett lingered, his eyes moving between Jesse and Eva. "Reverend Pike," he said finally. "A word in private." They stepped into Pike's study, through the broken door. Ava could hear Garrett's measured tones, Pike's defensive responses. Tom Garrett sidled closer to her. "Quite a morning," he said. "Must have been frightening, all those rough men." Eva began gathering scattered papers, ignoring him. "My father's protecting you, you know, all of you. A word from him and Boone would have hauled your drifter to jail. Or worse. Your father's protecting his investments," Jesse said quietly. He'd moved to help Ava, placing himself between her and Tom. "Nothing more." Tom's face flushed. "You don't know anything about it." "I know men like your father don't do favors without expecting payment." Jesse continued collecting scattered items, his movements unhurried, Question is, what's the price? Before Tom could answer, the study door opened. Garrett emerged, Pike behind him, looking older than his years. Thomas, we're leaving. Garrett paused at the door. Reverend, consider our conversation. My offer won't remain open indefinitely. After they left, Pike slumped against the wall. He wants to buy the church property, says he'll clear our debts, set us up in a smaller building on the edge of town. Let me guess. Jesse said, this land's worth more than he's offering. The railroad's planning a spur line. The depot would be... Pike gestured weakly. Right where we're standing. Eva felt something cold settle in her stomach. You said no? I said I'd pray on it. Pike looked around at his destroyed church. But prayer seems a luxury we can't afford anymore. Jesse moved to the stove, reached behind it where the pipe met the wall. His saddlebags emerged, dusty but intact. He'd wedged them in the dead space during the night, counting on searchers' blind spots. Reverend, he said, those papers I carry, they include records of land fraud. Caro and others forcing families off property before the railroad surveys were public. Your church might not be the first they've tried to steal. Pike stared at the bags like they contained serpents. Why tell me this? Because you stood up for what was right today. That deserves truth in return. Thunder rolled across the sky, and finally, the rain came. It hammered on the roof, poured through the holes Boone's men had made, pudding on the floor. Eva grabbed buckets, trying to catch the worst of it. I should go, she said quietly. This is happening because of me, because Tom Garrett. No, Pike's voice was firm. This is happening because greed and fear have ruled this town too long, because I let them rule me. He looked at Jesse. How long would it take to reach the territorial governor with your evidence? Weeks hard riding, assuming I made it past Boone's ambushes. And if you had help a church wagon, traveling openly? Jesse's eyes narrowed. You'd risk that? I've been a coward in the name of keeping peace, but there's no peace without justice. Pike straightened. Finish the windmill. We'll need water for the journey. Eva watched something pass between the two men, an understanding, a commitment. The rain poured harder, washing the dust from the windows, revealing the harsh, clean lines of the world outside. I'll help, she said quietly. Both men turned to her. I know the back trails. My father scouted them before... She swallowed. Before the sickness took them. I can guide us around the main roads. Eva, Pike began. No more hiding, she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. No more letting fear choose for us. Jesse smiled then, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, revealing the man he might have been before loss carved its lines. All right then, he said. Best get to work. Storm won't last forever, and we've got a windmill to fix and a territory to save. They worked through the storm, side by side, cleaning up the destruction, preparing for what came next. Eva's hands were steady now, her fear transformed into something harder, more useful. She thought of her mother's last words, whispered through fever, be brave, my girl, but more than brave, be good. Maybe, she thought as she watched Jesse and Pike plan their dangerous journey. Maybe being good sometimes meant standing up to those who weren't. Maybe it meant risking the little you had to prevent others from losing everything. The rain slowed to a drizzle by afternoon. Through the window, Eva could see the townspeople beginning to emerge, surveying the storm damage. But here in the church, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that would either wash them all away or clear the air for good. She touched the hidden pocket in her skirt where she'd sewn Jesse's evidence for safekeeping. Whatever came next, she was ready. The preacher's housekeeper had found her courage at last. The coal cellar was darker than a mine shaft, the air thick with dust that caught in Eva's throat. Above them, boots thundered across the floorboards as Boone's men searched again, this time with Judge Carter's warrant that gave them authority to tear the place apart board by board. Here, Jessie whispered, pressing something into her hands. A candle and matches. Keep it low. The tiny flame revealed their hiding place, a space barely large enough for two. Behind the coal bin Pike had shown her just minutes before Boone arrived. Jessie's shoulder pressed against hers, his breathing steady despite everything. "They'll find us," she breathed. Maybe, maybe not. His voice was calm as deep water. Pike's buying us time. Above, they could hear the Reverend's protests, measured and dignified. "This is harassment. Deputy, you searched yesterday." "And found nothing, which means we didn't search hard enough." Boone's voice carried through the floor. "The girl's disappeared. So's your drifter. That tells me all I need to know." Eva's hand shook, making the candle flame dance. Jessie covered it with his own, steadying both. "Tell me about your sister," she whispered, needing something besides fear to focus on. In the flickering light, his face changed, softened. "Sarah, 2 years younger than me, smart as a whip and twice as sharp. She could do figures in her head faster than most could on paper. Is that why Caro hired her?" That's why he thought he hired her. But Sarah saw more than numbers, saw patterns, connections. His jaw tightened. "She wrote me about the safety violations, the skimmed wages, the way accidents always happen to men who complained." A board creaked directly above them. They both froze, but the footsteps moved on. She was going to expose it all. Jessie continued, his voice barely a breath. "Had it documented proper, then came the cave-in. 12 dead, including the only woman who'd ever worked the mine's books. You think Caro?" "I know he did. The support beam that failed Sarah had marked it for replacement 3 times. Each time, the work order disappeared." He shifted slightly, and Eva caught the glint of something at his throat. A locket. Found her journal in her boarding house room, everything she couldn't put in official records. Names, dates, amounts. Who got paid to look the other way? The Deputy Boone. Among others, the judge, the territorial inspector. Even... He stopped, listening. The sounds above had changed. Fewer boots, voices growing distant. Even who? Jessie met her eyes in the candlelight. Tom Garrett's been running messages between his father and Caro, setting up the land grabs. Your church ain't the first they've forced out. Eva felt something cold settle in her chest. That's why why he thinks he has a claim on me. I'm just another property to acquire. You're nobody's property. The fierceness in Jessie's voice surprised her. Whatever debt you carry, whatever hold they think they have, it ain't real, just paper and threats. Paper seems real enough when it keeps you bound. Only if you let it. He reached into his shirt, pulled out the locket, opened it to reveal a photograph of a young woman with Jessie's eyes and a defiant smile. Sarah used to say that the only chains that matter are the ones we put on ourselves. Eva studied the photograph in the wavering light. Sarah looked fearless, like someone who'd never learned to make herself small. I'm not brave like her, Eva admitted. You're hiding in a coal cellar with a wanted man while law dogs tear apart your home. That's not brave. Despite everything, Eva felt a smile tug at her lips. When you put it that way. The cellar door rattled. They both tensed. Jesse's hand moving to his gun, but Pike's voice came through, low and urgent. They're gone, but not for long. They emerged into a kitchen that looked like a tornado had struck. Everything breakable was broken. Everything whole was torn. Eva's few possessions were scattered like seeds on barren ground. They're watching the roads, Pike said, his face grim. Garrett's thrown in with Boone completely. Says you're both fugitives now. What about the federal marshal? Jesse asked. 3 days away in Santa Fe, if he even comes. Pike rubbed his face. But there's another problem. Tom Garrett's putting it about that Eva, that she and Jesse, he couldn't finish. That I'm a fallen woman, Eva said flatly. Ruined, corrupted by the mysterious stranger. Jesse's face darkened. "Oh, you'll do nothing," Eva interrupted. "It's just words. I've survived worse." But they all knew it wasn't just words. In a town like Dry Willow, reputation was currency, and hers had just been bankrupted. "There's more," Pike said reluctantly. "Caro's called in all church debts. We have 3 days to pay or forfeit the property." The candle Ava still held flickered in a draft from the broken window. 3 days. It might as well have been 3 minutes for all the good it would do. "I have money," Jesse said quietly. "Not stolen railroad gold. My own savings. Sarah's life insurance. It's in a bank in Denver, but I could wire—" "No." Ava's voice surprised them all, including herself. "No more debts. No more being bought and sold, even with good intentions." "Then what?" Pike asked. Ava looked at the scattered pages from her mother's Bible, the torn letters from her father, all the careful, precious things that had kept her tethered to the past. Maybe it was time to let them go. "We run," she said. "Tonight, take Jesse's evidence to someone who'll listen. Let Caro have the building. The church isn't the walls anyway." Pike stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Eva." "You said it yourself. Reverend, no peace without justice. Well, there's no justice here. Not while men like Caro own everything, including the law." "The girl's right," Jesse said. "Stay here. We're sitting ducks. Move. We at least have a chance." Pike looked around his destroyed church, his life's work in ruins. Then something shifted in his face, like sun breaking through clouds. "The old mission trail," he said slowly. "Haven't used it in years, but it leads to Fort Union, federal territory, military justice." He looked at Jesse. "Would your evidence stand up to military scrutiny?" Sarah documented everything like she was preparing for court-martial. She knew military procedure inside and out. "Then we leave at moonrise. I'll prepare the wagon. Make it look like we're heading to the morning service at Cedar Ridge. You two stay hidden until—" The front door exploded inward. Tom Garrett stood there, flanked by 2 hired guns, whiskey-brave and mean-eyed. "Well, well," Tom slurred. "The pretty housekeeper and her savior. How touching." Jesse stepped forward, putting himself between Eva and the threat. "You're drunk, boy. Go home." "Boy," Tom laughed. Ugly. "I own this town. Own this church. Hell, I own her." He pointed at Ava. "Papa bought her debt this morning. Every penny. She belongs to us now." "I belong to no one," Ava said, stepping out from behind Jesse. Tom's eyes glittered. "Legal papers say different. You work for us now, and your first job is going to be real personal." One of his men chuckled. Jesse's hand dropped to his gun, but Eva caught his wrist. "Tom," she said, her voice steady as she'd ever heard it. "Do you remember last winter the scarlet fever outbreak?" He blinked, thrown by the change in subject. "Your little sister was sick, dying. The doctor said nothing he could do." Ava moved closer, Jesse shadowing her. "But I sat with her 3 days and nights, bathed her fever, spooned broth between her lips, prayed when she seized." "What's that got to—" "She lived because someone cared more about her life than their own rest. Because that's what decent people do." Ava was close enough now to see the uncertainty in Tom's bloodshot eyes. Is this what she'd want her brother forcing himself on the woman who saved her life? Tom's face went through several colors. His men shifted uncomfortably. That ain't—" he rallied. Anger overcoming shame. "You're coming with us, now." "No," Pike said, stepping forward. "She's not." "You gonna stop us, preacher?" "If need be." Pike's voice was calm. "But I don't think it'll come to that. You see, I spent the afternoon writing letters. To the bishop, to the newspaper in Santa Fe, to the territorial governor." He smiled thinly. "Amazing how much a man of God can remember when he finally decides to speak. about land deals, about fixed assays, about a certain fire at the Hendricks farm that happened right before they sold to your father for pennies on the dollar. Tom went white. You can't prove. I don't have to, just have to make people ask questions. Start pulling threads. Pike moved to stand beside Jesse and Eva. We all have secrets. Thomas, question is whether we want them staying buried. For a long moment, the standoff held. Then one of Tom's men spoke. This ain't worth what you're paying us. Garrett. Shut up! Tom snarled, but his men were already backing away. Your move, Jesse said quietly. But think real careful. You draw on a woman and 2 unarmed men in a church, even Boone won't be able to clean that up. Tom's hand hovered near his gun. Eva held her breath. Then, with a curse that would have made a mule skinner blush, he turned and stormed out. His men followed, leaving the door hanging open to the night. It's not over, Pike said quietly. No, Jesse agreed. But we bought time. Few hours, maybe. Eva moved to the scattered papers, began gathering them with steady hands. Then we'd better use them. Reverend, ready the wagon. Jesse, that windmill still needs finishing if we're leaving someone here to tend things. Both men looked at her, and she saw something new in their faces. Respect, as if she'd crossed some invisible line from protected to protector. What will you do? Pike asked. Eva smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt real. What I should have done long ago. Tell the truth, all of it. She moved through the ruined kitchen, selecting what they'd need for the journey. Her hands were steady now, her purpose clear. In the scattered pages of her mother's Bible, she found the verse she'd been looking for, "The truth shall make you free." Not comfortable, not safe, not easy, but free. Through the window, she could see Tom Garrett's men watching the church. Let them watch. By the time they realized what was happening, she and Jesse and Pike would be gone, carrying truth like ammunition toward justice. The candle on the table flickered but didn't go out, like hope. Eva thought, like courage, like the small, stubborn flame that refused to be extinguished no matter how hard the darkness pressed. She looked at Jesse, found him watching her with those steady eyes. Ready? He asked. She thought of Sarah, documenting truth until the mountain fell, of her parents, pushing toward a new life until sickness stopped them, of all the brave souls who'd refused to let fear choose their path. Ready, she said, and meant it. The church bell rang out across Dry Willow that Sunday morning, its bronze voice carrying farther than usual in the still air. Eva stood at the back of the sanctuary, watching the pews fill with an energy that felt electric, dangerous. Word had spread like wildfire today. The preacher's housekeeper would speak. Jesse sat in the last row, his presence a steady anchor. Pike stood at the pulpit, his face carved from stone. They'd spent the night preparing, knowing this moment would either free them or destroy them completely. The front pews filled with the town's power brokers. Samuel Garrett sat rigid, his wife beside him, their daughter Lucy, the one Eva had saved between them. Tom skulked in the side aisle, his hired men scattered throughout the congregation like wolves among sheep. Deputy Boone lounged near the door, star polished bright, hand resting casual on his gun. And there, in his customary place of honor, sat Marcus Caro. The mine owner wore black from head to toe, silver hair gleaming like a crown. His eyes found Eva, cold as shaft water. Brothers and sisters, Pike began, his voice carrying unusual strength. Today we hear testimony, not from scripture, but from life. Miss Eva Hale has asked to address you all. Whispers rose like rustling leaves. Eva walked forward, each step measured, fighting the tremor in her hands. She'd worn her mother's dress, carefully mended, the one saved for special occasions that never came. Until now. She reached the front, turned to face them all. The whispers died. My name, she began, Voice small but clear. Is Evangeline Grace Hale, daughter of Matthew and Ruth Hale, who died of cholera 2 summers past. I've served this church and this town in silence, as was proper. But silence, I have learned, can be its own kind of lie. Tom Garrett shifted, started to rise. His father's hand pressed him down. A year ago, Ava continued. Young mister, Garrett cornered me in the storeroom after Bible study. He pressed his attentions. When I refused, he said I had no choice, that his family owned my debt, owned me. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Mrs. Garrett's face went white. Lucy looked at her brother with shock. That's a lie, Tom burst out. Is it? Ava's voice gained strength. Then why was he banned from Bible study the very next week? Ask Reverend Pike. Ask why Mr. Garrett threatened to call in the church's debts if his son wasn't reinstated. All eyes turned to Pike, who nodded slowly. It's true. I chose the church's survival over justice. I was wrong. Ava pulled something from her pocket, a piece of grain sack, carefully preserved. This bears the Caro Mill stamp, the same stamp on the sacks given to miners as part of their wages. The same stamp. She looked directly at Caro. On the documents, mister. Jesse Raines carries documents that prove the mill has been shorting weights, charging company store prices that amount to theft. Caro's face darkened. You're harboring a criminal, a thief who what? Jesse stood, his voice cutting through. Who survived your attempts to silence him? Who carries his sister's proof of your murders? Murders, the word rippled through the crowd. Jesse walked forward, each step deliberate. Sarah Raines, my sister, your bookkeeper who documented every safety violation, every bribe, every corner cut that led to that cave-in. 12 dead because you wouldn't spend money on proper supports. You can't prove... Can't I? Jesse pulled papers from his coat, held them high. Her journal, work orders she filed that mysteriously disappeared, correspondence with the territorial inspector telling him which violations to ignore, all in her hand, all dated, all witnessed. The congregation erupted. People stood, voices raised. Boone's hand went to his gun, but found 3 of Pike's deacons had surrounded him, faces grim. Lies, Caro roared. This is all lies. Then let's ask about truth, Ava said, her voice somehow carrying over the chaos. Mrs. Henderson, didn't your husband die in that cave-in, Mrs. Rodriguez? Your son, Mr. Campbell? Your brother? One by one, people stood. The widows, the orphans, the brothers and sisters of the dead, silent witnesses to Caro's greed. And the land grabs, Ava continued. Mr. Garrett, how many farms has your bank foreclosed on just before railroad surveys were announced? How many families driven out by fires, by poisoned wells, by violence? Samuel Garrett's composed mask cracked. Business is business. Is it business when Tom set the Hendricks barn ablaze? Eva pulled out another paper. Billy Hendricks saw him, wrote it down, gave it to me before his family fled town. You little... Tom lunged forward, but Jesse was there, catching him by the collar, holding him like a rabid dog. Enough, Caro stood, imperious. Deputy, arrest these people, all of them. Boone tried to move, found his way blocked by half the congregation. Now, folks, let's not what? Old Martha Chen stepped forward, tiny but fierce. Let you arrest the only people brave enough to speak truth. My nephew died in that mine. Deputy, 16 years old. My brother, called out James Murphy. My father, added Maria Santos. The names kept coming. The litany of the dead, the cheated, the driven out. Years of silenced grief finding voice at last. Ava felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. We have proof, not just words, but documents, and we're taking them to Fort Union, to federal authorities who aren't bought and paid for. You'll never make it, Caro snarled. "The roads are watched by your men. We know." Ava smiled then, sad but determined. "That's why half the congregation left before dawn, taking different routes, carrying copies of every document. You can't stop them all." It was true. Pike's secret network, built over years of quiet resistance, farmers with hidden horses, merchants with false-bottomed wagons, all carrying the truth in different directions. Caro's face went purple. He pulled a derringer from his vest, aimed it at Eva. "You destroyed everything." Time slowed. Eva saw Jesse moving, too far away. Saw Pike stepping forward, arms spread. Saw Tom's eyes widen in sudden understanding of what his greed had spawned. But it was Lucy Garrett who acted, Tom's little sister. Alive because Eva had nursed her through fever. She broke from her mother's grasp, threw herself at Caro's arm. The gun fired, the sound enormous in the sanctuary. The bullet went wide, shattering a window. And then Caro was on the ground, Lucy's father and 3 other men holding him down. "Enough," Samuel Garrett said, breathing hard. "Enough blood, enough greed, enough." He looked at his son, and Tom seemed to shrink under that gaze. Then he turned to Eva. "The debts, your parents' burial, the church's loans, I'm forgiving them. All of them." His voice was tired. "It won't bring back the dead, won't undo the harm, but it's a start." "Papa, no," Tom protested. "You can't." "I can and I will." Garrett's voice was iron. "And you'll be on the next stage to San Francisco. Military school might make a man of you yet." The aftermath was chaos. Boone tried to arrest Jesse for the railroad theft, but found no support. The congregation closed ranks, protecting their truth-tellers. Someone produced rope for Caro, who spat curses until they gagged him. Through it all, Eva stood at the front of the church, trembling now that it was over. Jesse appeared at her side, his hand gentle on her elbow. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it." She looked up at him. "What happens now?" "Now we make sure that evidence reaches the right hands. Federal marshals, territorial governor, newspaper editors." He smiled. "Might take some traveling." "Together." The word hung between them, heavy with possibility. "If you'll have me," he said. "I'm not an easy man. Ava, I carry ghosts." "We all carry ghosts." She thought of her parents, of Sarah, of all the silenced dead. Maybe carrying them together makes them lighter. Pike approached, looking older but somehow lighter. "The church will survive. The Chens and the Murphys will tend it while I'm gone." He smiled. "Seems I have testimony to give to federal authorities." The sun was high now, streaming through the broken window, painting rainbows on the walls. The congregation was singing, an old hymn about justice rolling down like waters. Caro was being led away by men who'd lost family to his greed. The Garretts were leaving, Lucy clinging to Ava for one last goodbye. "Thank you," the girl whispered, "for saving me, twice." Ava hugged her tight. "Be brave, little one, but more than brave, be good." As the church emptied, Ava stood with Jesse and Pike, looking at the chaos and hope they'd unleashed. The windmill turned outside, repaired and true, pulling clean water from deep earth. "Ready?" Jesse asked, offering his arm. Ava took it, feeling the solid strength of him. "Ready?" They walked out together into the harsh, bright day. Behind them, the church bell rang again, not in alarm now, but in celebration. The sound followed them as they headed for the wagon, for the road, for whatever justice awaited beyond the horizon. The truth had made them free. Now they had to live with that freedom, dangerous and beautiful as it was. But Eva found she wasn't afraid anymore, not with Jesse beside her, not with purpose ahead of her, not with truth as their weapon and shield. The preacher's housekeeper had found her voice at last, and she would never be silent again. The wagon wheels found the old mission trail just as the sun began its descent toward the mesas. Pike handled the reins with surprising skill, guiding them along paths that existed more in memory than reality. Jesse rode alongside on his bay mare, rifle across his saddle, eyes scanning the horizon. Eva sat beside Pike, her mother's Bible in her lap, trying not to think about the dust cloud that had been following them for the past hour. "White Creek's just ahead," Pike said, his voice carefully neutral. "We'll water the horses there." They all knew White Creek meant the edge of Caro's reach. Beyond it lay disputed territory, where federal law meant more than local influence, if they could make it that far. Jesse pulled his mare closer to the wagon. "They're gaining. Maybe 6 riders?" "Boone?" Eva asked, though she already knew. "Most likely, maybe some of Caro's men who weren't in church." Jesse checked his rifle. Movements economical. "Reverend, there's a box canyon about a mile west, if we need to make a stand." "No." Pike's voice was firm. "No more bloodshed. We run or we surrender, but we don't fight." "They won't give us that choice," Jesse said quietly. Eva touched the hidden pocket in her skirt where she'd sewn copies of the most damning documents. The originals were in the wagon's false bottom, but these copies were insurance. "How far to the federal checkpoint?" 8 miles past White Creek," Pike replied. "Too far if they catch us in the open." The trail wound through a stand of cottonwoods, their leaves rustling with secrets. Eva remembered traveling this way with her parents, before the sickness, when the future seemed as wide as the sky. Now it had narrowed to this, a desperate flight toward justice that might not come. "There," Jesse pointed. "White Creek." The creek was barely a trickle this late in the season, but the horses needed water. They stopped in the shadow of red rocks, Jesse keeping watch while Pike tended the animals. Eva climbed down, legs stiff from hours of travel. "Eva," Jesse's voice was soft. "Come here." She joined him at a gap in the rocks where he was studying their back trail. The dust cloud was closer now, individual riders visible. 7 men, he said. "Boone and 6 others. They'll be on us in 20 minutes. What do we do?" He turned to her, and she saw decision in his eyes. "You and Pike take the wagon. I'll delay them." "No." "Ava." "No." She gripped his arm. "We stay together or not at all. This isn't a dime novel. They won't hesitate to what, kill us?" Eva's laugh was bitter. "They've been killing us slowly for years. At least this way we die free." Jesse studied her face, then smiled. "Sarah would have liked you. Same stubborn streak. Must run in the company you keep." She squeezed his arm. "There has to be another way." Pike joined them, his face grim but determined. "There is the old Apache trading post. It's defended, and more importantly, it's on the old Spanish land grant, technically foreign soil until the treaty's finalized next month." "Technically won't stop bullets," Jesse said. "No, but it might make Boone hesitate. He's many things, but he's careful about jurisdiction." Pike looked between them. "It's 2 miles north, rough trail. We'd have to abandon the wagon." Ava thought of all they carried evidence, supplies, her few remaining possessions. Then she thought of her parents, who'd abandoned everything for the chance at a new life. "We can pack the essentials on the horses," she said. "The documents, water, ammunition." "You're learning to think like a fugitive," Jesse said, but his tone was approving. They worked fast, transferring the most crucial items to saddlebags. Ava packed the evidence with shaking hands. Each document a life lost, a family destroyed. This paper was their only weapon against men who owned everything else. As she worked, Jesse taught her to ride his mare. "She's gentle but smart. If something happens to me, nothing will happen to you." Ava cut him off. "We're all getting through this." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs gentle on her cheeks. "If we don't, then we don't, but we try." She covered his hands with hers. That's what Sarah would do. What my parents did. Try until trying's done. Pike cleared his throat. They're moving faster. We need to go. They left the wagon like a broken promise by the creek. Pike's old mare carrying double while Jesse scouted ahead. The trail to the trading post was barely visible, winding through arroyos and over ridges that grabbed at their clothes and tested their resolve. Behind them, shouts echoed off canyon walls. Boone had found the wagon. Faster! Jesse urged, but the horses were already laboring. They crested a ridge and saw at the old trading post. Adobe walls thick as a man's arm span, narrow windows perfect for defense. The Spanish flag still flew beside the American one, marking the diplomatic ambiguity of the place. Hello, the post! Pike called out in his preacher's voice. The door opened, and a grizzled man emerged, shotgun casual in his hands. Eva recognized him Moses Trueheart, former Buffalo soldier, current trader and keeper of neutrality. Reverend, Moses nodded. Miss Eva, and you'd be the fellow causing all the commotion in town. Moses, Pike said urgently. We need sanctuary, just until federal marshals. I know what you need. Moses studied the dust rising from the trail behind them. Question is whether I can give it. This post survives on staying neutral. Please, Eva said, surprising herself by speaking up. We have evidence of murders, of theft, of powerful men doing what powerful men do. Moses's smile was sad. Child, I've seen that story play out 100 times. Then help us make this time different. Jesse said. He dismounted, standing ready but not threatening. You wore the uniform once. You know what justice means. Moses was quiet for a long moment. Then, inside, quick now. And Reverend, you might want to say a prayer. We're gonna need it. They rushed into the trading post just as Boone's riders appeared on the ridge. The inside was dim, cool, smelling of leather and spices. Moses barred the door with a beam thick as a tree trunk. Windows, he said tersely. Don't shoot unless they do. This is technically Spanish soil for another 3 weeks, and I'd like to keep it peaceful. Eva found herself at a window with Jesse, his presence steady beside her. Through the narrow opening, she could see Boone's men spreading out, surrounding the post. Moses Trueheart, Boone's voice carried clear. Send them out. This ain't your fight. Moses appeared at the door's small window. Deputy, you know the rules here. This post is neutral ground. Has been for 20 years. Not anymore. Caro's offering $1,000 for the girl and the evidence. $500 for the men. Eva felt Jesse tense beside her. $1,000 was more than most men saw in 5 years. That's a lot of money, Moses called back. It is. Be smart, old man. Moses laughed, rich and deep. Son, I've been called many things, but smart ain't usually one of them. He grew serious. You got a warrant. Don't need one. They're fugitives. From what court under what law? Moses's voice turned lawyer sharp. This is Spanish grant land until the treaty's signed. You fire on this post, you're committing an act of war. That's horsey. That's law. Moses cut him off. Same law that lets you wear that badge. Can't have it both ways. Deputy. Silence stretched like a held breath. Eva could see Boone conferring with his men, gesturing angrily. Some seemed reluctant, glancing at the flags flying overhead. He's not wrong, one rider said, voice carrying in the still air. My brother got arrested in El Paso for less, spent 2 years in a Mexican prison. Shut up, Boone snarled. But Eva could see doubt spreading through his men like water through sand. Inside, Pike had found Moses's Bible, was reading quietly. The words drifted over, the horse is prepared for battle, but victory belongs to the Lord. Amen, Moses said softly. Then louder, Boone, I'll make you a deal. You and your men camp outside tonight. Come morning, if federal marshals ain't here, we'll talk again. But tonight, this post stays neutral. And if we come in anyway..." Moses pumped his shotgun, the sound carrying clear. "Then you better bring more than 7 men. I got friends among the Apache, the Mexican traders. Hell, even some of your own men who remember when I wore blue." He paused. "Your choice. Deputy, wait one night, or start a war you can't finish." The standoff stretched taut as wire. Ava found Jesse's hand, squeezed it tight, so much hanging on the pride and fear of violent men. Finally, Boone spat in the dirt. "Make camp," he told his men. "We wait." As the sun set, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold, Ava stood at the window watching Boone's men settle in for a siege. Inside, Moses shared his simple supper with them: beans and cornbread, strong coffee, dried apple pie that tasted like hope. "Why?" Pike asked finally. "Why risk everything for us?" Moses smiled, weathered face creasing. "You remember Sarah Raines, Reverend..." Jesse's head snapped up. "You knew my sister." "Smart girl. Used to come here to post letters. Real careful about it, too." Moses pulled out a worn envelope. "Left this for me to send if anything happened to her. Never got the chance, what with the cave-in so sudden." Jesse took the envelope with shaking hands. His name was written on it in Sarah's careful script. "She knew," Moses continued. "Knew what Caro was, what he'd do. Told me if her brother ever came looking for justice. I was to help however I could." He shrugged. "I'm a man who pays his debts." Jesse opened the letter, read silently. Ava saw tears track down his cheeks, the first she'd seen from him. When he finished, he handed it to her. Asterisk Jesse. Asterisk it read. Asterisk if you're reading this. Then I was right about the danger. Don't mourn me. Fight them. Find the evidence I left. Make them pay not with blood but with justice. And Jesse, let yourself love again. Let someone love you. The world's too hard to face alone. Your sister, always. Sarah. Ava handed the letter back, her own eyes burning. Jesse folded it carefully, placed it over his heart. "She was right," he said quietly, "about everything." Outside, Boone's men had fires going, the flames dancing in the darkness. But inside the trading post, there was different warmth. The warmth of purpose, of friendship, of love finally admitted if not yet spoken. "Federal marshals will come," Pike said, faith steady in his voice. "The truth will out." "Maybe," Moses said, "but tonight we hold the line. Tonight we keep the light burning." Ava stood at the window, Jesse beside her, watching the stars emerge like promises in the vast dark sky. Tomorrow would bring what it brought, but tonight they were together, alive and free. It was enough, for now. It was everything. The shot came just after midnight, shattering the window near Eva's head. Glass scattered like deadly stars across the floor as Jesse pulled her down, covering her with his body. "So much for waiting until morning," Moses growled, returning fire through another window. The night erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like angry fireflies. Bullets thudded into the thick adobe walls, searching for weakness. "Ava, stay down," Jesse commanded, already moving to a defensive position. But she was already crawling toward Pike, who'd been grazed by flying debris. Blood seeped through his shirt sleeve, dark in the lamplight. "It's nothing," Pike insisted, but his face was pale. Eva tore strips from her petticoat with steady hands. "Hold still, Reverend." She worked quickly. Lessons learned from nursing her parents flooding back. The wound was shallow but bleeding freely. "Northwest corner," Moses shouted. "They're trying to flank us." Jesse moved like liquid shadow, appearing at each threatened point. His rifle spoke sparingly but with purpose, driving attackers back. Eva finished binding Pike's arm, then grabbed the shotgun Moses had given her earlier. You know how to use that? Jesse asked during a lull. Point and pull. How hard can it be? Despite everything, he smiled. That's my girl. The words hung between them for a heartbeat before another volley drove them to separate windows. The siege stretched through the endless night. Eva lost count of the shots fired, the times they drove back attempts to rush the door. Her shoulder ached from the shotgun's kick. Her ears rang, but she held her position. Running low on ammunition, Moses reported grimly, "Dawn's coming," Pike said from his post. "Look." Sure enough, the eastern sky showed the faintest gray. With light would come clarity and likely a final assault. "Eva," Jesse called softly. "Come here." She joined him at his window. In the growing light, she could see Boone's men regrouping, preparing for something. "If this goes badly," he began. "It won't." "But if it does?" He pulled her close, speaking urgently. "There's a hidden panel in the wall behind Moses's counter. The evidence is there. If they take me..." "They won't take you." She gripped his shirt. "We survived together, or..." "Listen to me." His voice was fierce. "You survive. You get that evidence to the territorial governor. You make Sarah's death mean something. Promise me." Before she could answer, a new sound cut through the dawn hoofbeats. Many of them, approaching fast from the east. "More of Caro's men?" Pike asked. Moses squinted through his spyglass. Then he began to laugh, deep and rich. "No, Reverend. That there is the U.S. Cavalry, Troop B from Fort Union, unless I miss my guess." Eva's knees nearly buckled with relief. Jesse caught her, held her steady as they watched blue uniforms crest the ridge, spreading out in battle formation. "Drop your weapons," the cavalry commander's voice boomed across the desert. "By order of the United States Army." Boone's men milled in confusion. Some threw down their guns immediately. Others looked to their leader, who sat his horse like a statue, calculating odds. "Deputy Boone," the commander continued. "Captain Marcus Webb, Fort Union. We've received federal warrants for your arrest. You and your men will surrender immediately." "On what charges?" Boone shouted back, but his voice had lost its authority. "Conspiracy, murder, theft of federal property, and about a dozen other charges. Marshal Stevens is a day behind me with the paperwork, but I'm authorized to detain you until he arrives." Eva felt Jesse sag against her. "It's over," he whispered. "It's finally over." But Boone wasn't finished. In the growing light, Eva saw him turn his horse, saw his hand drop to his gun. He was looking directly at their window. At her, his face twisted with rage. "Oh, look out!" Moses shouted. Several things happened at once. Boone drew and fired. Jesse shoved Eva aside. Grunting as the bullet meant for her caught him in the side. Moses's shotgun boomed. Cavalry rifles cracked in unison. When the smoke cleared, Boone lay still in the dust. "Jesse?" Eva dropped beside him, hands pressing against the wound. Blood seeped between her fingers, hot and terrifying. "No, no, no!" "Hey!" His voice was strained, but aware. "Remember what I taught you. Pressure, steady." She pressed harder, tears blurring her vision. Pike appeared with Moses's medical supplies, his own injury forgotten. "Through and through," Moses diagnosed after a quick examination. "Missed the vitals, but he's losing blood." They worked together, Eva's world narrowing to the rhythm of Jesse's breathing, the beat of his heart under her hands. "Stay with me," she prayed silently. "Stay." Captain Webb entered, taking in the scene with professional eyes. "My medic's on the way. We'll get him to the fort." "The evidence," Jesse managed. "Behind the counter." "We'll handle it. Son, you just focus on breathing." The rest blurred together the cavalry medic's arrival, the careful loading onto a travois, the slow journey to Fort Union with Eva refusing to leave Jesse's side. She held his hand through it all, whispering prayers and promises and pleas. At the fort, the doctor worked for what seemed like hours while Eva paced outside, still wearing her blood-stained dress. Pike sat on a bench, Bible open but unread. "He'll make it," Pike said quietly. "Men like him don't survive all that just to die from one bullet."
"Sarah died,"
Eva whispered.
"She was strong too."
"Sarah's death brought justice. Jesse's life will see it through." Pike closed the Bible. "Have faith, Eva, in God, yes, but also in Him and in yourself." The door opened. The doctor, a thin man with kind eyes, emerged wiping his hands. "He'll live," he said simply. "Lost blood, but the bullet missed anything vital. Week or two of rest. He'll be riding again." Eva's legs gave out. Pike caught her, guided her to the bench as relief washed over her like a flash flood.
"Can I see him?"
"He's asking for you." The doctor smiled, quite insistently. Jesse was pale against the white sheets but awake, alert. His eyes found hers immediately. "Hey," he said softly.
"Hey, yourself."
She took his hand, careful of the bandages.
"You scared me."
"Sorry, didn't mean to." He squeezed her fingers. "The evidence."
"Safe. Captain Webb has it. Marshal Stevens arrived an hour ago. They're already preparing cases."
She smoothed his hair back.
"It's over. Jesse, really over."
"No." He pulled her closer. "It's just beginning." She understood. The trials would come, the testimony, the long fight to see justice truly done, but also them, whatever they were becoming. "Eva," he said, "what Sarah wrote, about not facing the world alone." "Yes," she said simply. He blinked.
"You don't even know what I was going to ask."
"Doesn't matter. The answer's yes." She leaned down, pressed her forehead to his. "I told you, we survived together." "That's not a proposal," he murmured. "When I do it proper, there'll be a ring, and I'll be on my feet, not flat on my back."
"I'll wait."
She smiled through tears. "I'm good at waiting." "No more waiting," he said fiercely. "No more silence. No more fear. We live, Eva, really live. Together. Together." Pike cleared his throat from the doorway. "I hate to interrupt, but Marshal Stevens needs to speak with you, Eva, about your testimony." She looked at Jesse, reluctant to leave. "Go," he said. "Tell them everything. Make it count." She kissed him then, soft and careful but full of promise. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away tears. "I'll be here," he promised, "always." As Eva left to face the marshal, to speak truth into official record, she felt something fundamental had shifted. The preacher's virgin housekeeper was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd faced down evil and won, who'd found love in the midst of chaos, who'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear but action in spite of it. The sun was setting over Fort Union, painting the sky in shades of hope. Through the window, she could see cavalrymen bringing in more of Caro's accomplices. The wheels of justice, so long stopped, were finally turning. Tomorrow would bring depositions. Next week, trials. Next month, perhaps, a wedding in a small church where truth had finally found its voice. But tonight, Eva Hale walked into the marshal's office with her head high and her story ready. Tonight, she would speak for Sarah Raines and all the silenced dead. Tonight, justice would have its say. And somewhere in a clean white room, Jesse Raines rested and healed, waiting for her return, waiting for their beginning. The wound would scar, but scars were just proof of survival. And they had survived, against all odds, against all power set against them. They had survived. Now it was time to live. The makeshift courthouse at Fort Union buzzed with tension thick as summer honey. Eva sat in the witness chair, hands folded in her lap, facing a room full of stern faces. Federal Judge Harrison Marsh presided, his gavel heavy with authority. Jesse sat in the front row, still pale but steady. Pike beside him. "State your name for the record." The prosecutor, Mr. David Thornton, began. Evangeline Grace Hale. "Miss Hale, please tell the court about the events of September last year." Eva drew a breath, found Jesse's eyes. He nodded slightly. Tell them everything. "I was organizing the church storeroom after Bible study when Tom Garrett entered. He pressed his attentions. When I refused, he said his family owned my debt, that I had no choice in the matter." "And did you report this incident?" "No, sir, I was afraid. The Garretts held the church's mortgages. My position, my ability to pay my parents' burial debt, it all depended on their goodwill." Across the courtroom, Samuel Garrett sat rigid, his face carved from stone. Tom was absent, already shipped to military school, but his shadow lingered. "Let's move to the matter of Marcus Caro," Thornton continued. "What did you know of his operations?" "For the next hour." Ava spoke about the miners' wives who came to church with stories of shortened pay, about the families driven from their land, about Sarah Raines, who tried to document it all. "Objection," Caro's lawyer, a slick man from Denver named Prescott, stood. "Hearsay, Your Honor. Miss Hale has no direct knowledge." "I have this." Ava produced a small ledger from her pocket. "Sarah Raines gave it to me 2 days before she died. Said if anything happened, I should keep it safe." The courtroom stirred. This was new, unexpected. Judge Marsh leaned forward. "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" "Because I was a coward, Your Honor." Ava's voice was steady. "Because I chose safety over justice. I'll carry that shame forever." Thornton took the ledger, examined it. His eyes widened. "Your Honor, this appears to be a duplicate set of books for the Caro mining operations. It shows systematic wage theft, safety violations, and bribes to Deputy Marshal Boone, Judge Carter, and others." "Let me see that." Judge Marsh studied the entries, his face darkening. "Bailiff, is Judge Carter in the building?" "Yes, Your Honor, observing from chambers." "Arrest him, now!" Chaos erupted. Prescott shouted objections. Caro lurched to his feet, face purple. "This is fabrication, that girl, that harlot." "Silence!" Marsh's gavel cracked like gunshot. "One more outburst and you'll be gagged." When order was restored, Thornton continued. "Miss Hale, why did Sarah Raines trust you with this?" Eva considered her words. "She said good people sometimes need to be reminded they're good, that staying silent made us complicit." She looked directly at Caro. She was right. The rest of her testimony covered the church raid, the flight to Fort Union, the siege at Moses Trueheart's trading post. When she finished, the room sat in stunned silence. "Thank you, Miss Hale." Judge Marsh's voice was grave. "Mr. Prescott, your witness." Caro's lawyer approached like a circling wolf. "Miss Hale, isn't it true you've been intimate with Jesse Raines?" Heat flooded her cheeks, but she held his gaze. "Define intimate. Have you shared private moments, been alone together?" "Yes, shared physical contact. He saved my life several times. That required contact." Prescott smiled unpleasantly. "I'm suggesting, Miss Hale, that you fabricated this evidence to please your lover, that you're a fallen woman seeking revenge on respectable men who rejected your advances." Ava felt the old fear rise, the urge to make herself small. Then she saw Jesse's face, tight with controlled anger, Pike's quiet faith, her own reflection in the window, not a frightened girl, but a woman who'd faced down worse than words. "Mr. Prescott," she said clearly, "I've been called worse by better men. Yes, I love Jesse Raines. No, we haven't been improper, though that's none of your business. And everything I've testified is the truth." She leaned forward. You want to paint me as a fallen woman, fine. But fallen women can tell the truth. And the truth is your client murdered 14 people for money. Objection. Sustained. The jury will disregard 15 people. Ava continued, voice rising. Sarah Raines was pregnant. She just found out, wanted to tell Jesse in person. So she waited and died for it. The courtroom went still. Jesse's face had gone white. Ava realized he hadn't known. That's a lie, Caro snarled. It's in her journal, the one your men couldn't find because she hid it in the church poor box. Ava pulled out another small book. She knew you'd search her room, knew you'd try to silence her, so she put the truth where greedy men never look with charity. Judge Marsh took the journal, read silently. His hands shook slightly as he turned pages. This court will recess, he said heavily. Marshal Stevens, take Mr. Caro into federal custody. The charge is murder. 15 counts. As marshals led Caro away, still protesting, Ava stepped down from the witness chair. Jesse was there, tears streaming down his face. She never told me, he whispered. A baby. Sarah's baby. Ava held him as he grieved anew. This fresh loss layered over the old, around them. The courtroom cleared. People fleeing the weight of truth revealed. That evening, in the quiet of the Fort Chapel, Pike performed a memorial service for all Caro's victims. The small space filled with miners' families, townsfolk who'd driven hours to attend. Ava sang Amazing Grace, her voice clear and true, while Jesse stood silent, processing this new grief. Marshal Stevens found them afterward. Miss Hale, Mr. Raines, thought you should know we've frozen Caro's accounts. The territorial governor's ordering restitution to the victims' families. Blood money, Jesse said bitterly. Maybe, but it'll keep roofs over heads, food on tables. Stevens hesitated. There's also a reward for the evidence that led to his capture. $5,000. Ava gasped. It was a fortune enough to build a new life anywhere. Give it to the families, Jesse said immediately. Jesse, no. Ava touched his arm. Sarah would want justice. This is part of it. He looked at Stevens. Divided among them, equally. The marshal nodded, respect clear in his eyes. I'll see it done. Later, walking under stars bright as promises, Eva and Jesse found themselves at the fort's small cemetery. A temporary marker showed where they'd buried Sarah properly, with dignity and truth at last. I'm sorry, Ava said softly. About the baby. I should have told you differently. You told the truth when it mattered. That's all anyone could ask. Jesse knelt by the grave, placed a small stone on the marker, a Jewish custom Sarah had adopted from a fellow teacher. She always wanted children, said they were hope walking around on 2 legs. She sounds wonderful. She was stubborn, brilliant, impossible. He smiled through tears. She'd have liked you, would have teased me mercilessly about falling for a preacher's housekeeper. Former housekeeper, Ava corrected. I seem to be unemployed. Jesse stood, took her hands. About that, I've been thinking. Dangerous habit. Ava, his voice went serious. The reward's gone, given away. I've got some savings, but not much. A man's supposed to offer security. Stop! She pressed fingers to his lips. I don't need security. I need you. You have me, always, but... Jesse Raines, are you trying to talk me out of marrying you? He blinked. I haven't asked yet. Then ask. There in the cemetery, under Sarah's watching stars. Jesse knelt again. This time, he pulled out a simple band silver, etched with tiny flowers. It was Sarah's, he said. I know she'd want. He steadied himself. Evangeline Grace Hale. Will you marry me? I can't promise wealth or ease, but I promise to love you, protect you, stand beside you until my last breath. Will you have me? Eva knelt too, meeting him at eye level. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, kissed her softly. Somewhere in the fort, a bugle played taps, the notes floating over them like a benediction. When? He asked. Soon. Tomorrow. Pike can... She stopped, remembering. Pike's going back to Dry Willow to rebuild the church. Without us. He says we've earned a new start, somewhere fresh. She studied his face. Unless you want to go back. Jesse looked at Sarah's grave, then at Eva. Forward. Always forward. That's what she'd say. California, Oregon. Wherever you want, wherever we can build something good. They rose together, hand in hand. The trial would continue tomorrow. More testimony. More truth dragged into light. But tonight, they had this, each other. A future uncertain but their own. As they walked back toward the fort, Eva began to hum. Not a hymn this time, but an old trail song her father used to sing. About new horizons and endless sky. About leaving sadness behind and riding toward dawn. Jesse joined in, his voice rough but true. Together they sang into the darkness. Two souls who'd found each other in the wreckage of injustice, who'd learned that love wasn't just feeling but choosing, again and again, to stand together against whatever came. Behind them, Sarah's grave stood sentinel under the stars. Ahead, the lights of Fort Union promised warmth, rest, and tomorrow's battles. But for now, for this moment suspended between grief and joy, they had enough. They had each other. They had truth. They had love. It was, Eva thought as Jesse's hand found hers, more than she'd ever dared dream, and only the beginning of what they'd build together. The new stage stop rose from the desert like a promise kept. 6 months after the trial. Eva stood on the porch of what had become the Rain's rest station, watching the afternoon stage approach through shimmering heat. The building was modest but solid pine logs from the nearby mountains, adobe bricks made from local clay, a tin roof that sang in the rain. Jesse emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. Marriage had softened some of his sharp edges, though his eyes still held that watchful quality. He moved to stand beside her, one hand resting gentle on her shoulder. Full coach today, he observed. Mrs. Patterson wrote that she's sending her niece, the one who needs schooling. Eva smiled. Our evening class is growing. It had started small, Eva teaching letters to a miner's daughter while her father changed horses. Word spread, as word does in frontier towns. Now 3 evenings a week, their main room filled with children and adults alike, learning to read by lamplight. Jesse had built extra benches, traded work for slates and chalk. The stage pulled up in a cloud of dust. The driver, old Pete Simmons, called down. Got mail for you, Mrs. Raines, and a package from Denver. Eva's heart quickened. The package would be books, a donation from a sympathetic teacher who'd read about their work in the territorial newspaper. Every book was precious out here, where knowledge was scarcer than water. Passengers climbed down, stretching stiff limbs. Among them, a familiar figure in black made Eva's breath catch. Reverend Pike, grayer than when they'd parted but smiling broad. Reverend? She flew down the steps into his embrace. Eva, Jesse. Pike shook hands warmly. The place looks wonderful. Come inside. Jesse said, You must be parched. Over cool water and Eva's cornbread. Pike shared news from Dry Willow. The church is rebuilt, smaller but debt-free. The Garretts left town, couldn't stand the shame after the trial. Their house is a school now. And Caro, Jesse asked. 20 years hard labor. His mines are under federal management. The families are finally getting fair wages. Pike's eyes twinkled. Moses Trueheart runs the company store now. Fair prices, honest scales. Eva poured more water, hiding her smile. Justice had many faces, and Moses wearing one of them seemed fitting. But I didn't come just for visiting. Pike continued. I have something for you. He pulled out an official-looking envelope. From the Territorial Education Board. Ava's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, certification papers bore her name, * Evangeline Grace Rains, certified to teach in the territory of New Mexico. How? She breathed. Your work here hasn't gone unnoticed. Mrs. Patterson has connections. When the board heard about your evening classes, your dedication, Pike smiled. They waived the formal requirements. Experience, they said, counts more than credentials. Jesse pulled her close, pride shining in his eyes. Teacher, it suits you. There's more, Pike said. The government's establishing formal schools along the stage routes. They need teachers willing to work in remote stations. It comes with a stipend, books, supplies. Ava looked around their main room at the handmade benches, the precious few books, the slate board Jesse had painted on the wall. Then she looked at him, question in her eyes. Your choice, he said simply. Always your choice. Yes, she said, yes to all of it. That evening, the room filled earlier than usual. Word of Pike's visit had spread, and folks came to pay respects. The evening class swelled to 20 souls minors, ranchers' wives, traveling salesmen, children fidgeting on benches. Ava began with their usual opening, reading from whatever book they had. Tonight, she chose Pilgrim's Progress, the allegory fitting for lives spent journeying toward hope. The hill, though high, I covet to ascend, she read. The difficulty will not me offend. A small hand tugged her skirt. Maria Santos, 8 years old, daughter of the local blacksmith. Mrs. Ava, what's covet mean? It means to want something very much, Ava explained. Like how you coveted that peppermint stick at the general store. Understanding dawned on the child's face, and Ava felt the familiar warmth that came with teaching. This was her calling. She realized, not keeping someone else's house but building minds, opening doors. After class, as folks lingered over coffee and conversation, Jesse played his harmonica, a skill Eva hadn't known he possessed until after their wedding. The music was simple but sweet, old trail songs and hymns mixing in the evening air. Moses' true heart sat with Pike, the 2 old soldiers swapping stories. In the corner, Marshal Stevens, visiting on his rounds, showed rope tricks to delighted children. The room hummed with community, with connections forming like roots in dry soil. Play Shenandoah, someone called out. Jesse obliged, the mournful melody filling the space. Ava found herself thinking of all the rivers they'd crossed to get here, rivers of grief, of fear, of silence finally broken. Now they rested beside still waters, but the journey had made them who they were. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Lucy Garrett appeared in the doorway, Tom's little sister, now 12, taller and carrying herself with new confidence. Lucy, Ava embraced her. What are you doing here? Father sent me to finishing school in Santa Fe, but I wanted to stop here first. She pulled out a letter. From Tom. Ava tensed, but Lucy shook her head. It's an apology, a real one. Military school. It changed him. Or maybe losing everything did. She handed over the letter. He wanted you to have this. Later, after everyone had gone and Pike was settled in the guest room, Ava and Jesse sat on the porch in the cool night air. She read Tom's letter by lantern light. It was awkward, fumbling, but genuine, a young man trying to find words for shame and regret. Do you forgive him? Jesse asked. I'm working on it. Forgiveness is like learning to read takes practice. She folded the letter carefully. Maybe I'll write back. Someday. Jesse pulled out his own correspondence, a letter from the railroad company. They wanted to extend the spur line past their station, make it a proper depot. Progress, he said, not entirely happy. means more people, more noise, more students, Ava countered. More chances to make a difference. He smiled, pulled her close. Always looking for the good, aren't you? Someone taught me that broken things can be fixed. She touched the scar on his side. Healed now, but still sensitive. That includes people. The windmill creaked in the night breeze, not the broken one from Dry Willow, but their own, drawing sweet water from deep earth. Ava remembered another windmill. Another night, when she'd been too frightened to hope for anything beyond survival. Now she had a home built by their own hands, a purpose greater than mere existence, a love tested by fire and proved true, and growing inside her, though Jessie didn't know yet. New life, hope walking around on two legs, as Sarah had said. Reverend Pike asked if we'd consider naming the school after Sarah, she said softly. Jessie's arms tightened around her. The Sarah Rain School. She'd mock us for the sentiment, then secretly be pleased. Should we? Yes, but also, he hesitated. I've been writing to that newspaper editor in Denver about the other mining camps, the other Caros still operating. Someone needs to investigate, document, expose. Eva heard what he wasn't saying, the wandering in his blood, the need to finish what Sarah started. She'd known when she married him that Jesse Raines wasn't a man for staying still. Then we do both, she said. I teach while you travel. You investigate while I build the school. We meet in the middle. You do that, live that way. Jesse, she turned in his arms, met his eyes. I spent years afraid of my own shadow. Now I'm not afraid of anything except wasting the life we've earned. If you need to ride, ride. Just come home to me. He kissed her then, deep and sure. Always. Every trail leads back to you. The church bell, Pike's gift, hung from a timber frame Jesse built, rang softly in the wind. Not calling people to service now, but marking time, marking peace, marking the slow transformation of a stage stop into a community. Tomorrow, Pike would bless their school officially. Next week, the first formal classes would begin. Next month, Jesse would ride out on his first investigation, carrying truth like a weapon against those who thought distance meant impunity. But tonight, they sat together on their porch, watching stars wheel overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their flight, their fear, their courage. Now they witnessed this quieter bravery, the daily choice to build rather than tear down, to teach rather than silence, to love rather than simply survive. In the distance, a coyote called, wild and free. Another answered, then another, until the night filled with their song. Ava smiled, remembering her fear of such sounds when she'd first come west. Now she heard them as they were creatures calling to their kin, saying, I am here. I survived another day. I am not alone. She placed Jesse's hand on her stomach, felt him go still as understanding dawned. Really, he whispered. Really, come spring. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. She felt him tremble. This man who'd faced down guns without flinching. Sarah would be so happy, he managed. She is, Ava said, believing it. Somewhere, she is. They sat in silence then, holding each other and their secret, their future. The windmill turned lazily, pulling life from hidden depths. The bell chimed once more, soft as a blessing. And in the main room of the Rains rest station, books waited on handmade shelves, ready to open minds and change lives. The preacher's virgin housekeeper had found her voice, her purpose, her love. Now she would spend her days ensuring others found theirs too. It was, she thought as Jesse's child quickened within her for the first time, more than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about Ava and Jesse's journey. If you enjoyed this tale from the American frontier, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means the world and helps keep these tales of courage and love alive. Until next time, partners.